The ranch, the rules, and the first signs of trouble. My family has lived on the outskirts of Willow Creek for 4 generations. We own over 200 acres of ranch land, stretching from the river bend to the Cedar Hills. Out here, the land teaches you respect for nature, for animals, and for those who work from sunrise to sunset. But a mile down the road sits a newly built subdivision, Cedar Ridge Estates, run by one of the strictest homeowners associations in the county. And leading that HOA was a woman named Margaret Whitlock, sharp-tongued, stubborn, and overly proud of rules she didn't create the land for, but forced upon everyone around her anyway. At first, I didn't care much about the HOA drama. My name is Samuel Hayes, rancher, father, and the last man in Willow Creek who'd argue about the color of someone's mailbox or the length of their grass. But Margaret treated this town like her personal kingdom. You couldn't hang laundry outside, couldn't park an old truck in your own driveway, couldn't even keep more than 2 dogs without written approval. Of course, none of this applied to me. My ranch was private property, older than any HOA, and legally outside their jurisdiction. But Margaret didn't care about laws when ego was involved. Her biggest complaint? My cattle occasionally crossed the creek and wandered near the fancy subdivision. She said they were ruining the neighborhood aesthetic. I said they were drinking water on my land. That was the beginning of the tension. One evening, she sent me a letter, thick, official-looking, signed with flourish, demanding I remove my livestock from community-adjacent areas. I laughed, tossed it into the fire, and thought that would be the end. I was wrong. Petty reports started coming in. Someone from the HOA complained that my ranch entrance sign was too rustic. Another claimed my barn lights were too bright at night. One man even said he could hear my rooster at dawn, and it was disturbing his meditation. Routine, I ignored them all. I had calves being born, fences to mend, and a drought creeping in. Real problems, not made-up ones. That's when Margaret showed up on my property for the first time. It was early morning, the sun barely over the hills. I was loading hay bales into the truck when I heard shoes, not boots, crunching on gravel. I turned and there she was, perfectly pressed suit, heels sinking into ranch dirt, sunglasses, clipboard in hand like she owned the place. "Mr. Hayes," she said with a sugar-coated smile, "your animals are violating community standards again." I wiped sweat from my forehead. "Ma'am, this is a cattle ranch. Animals live here," she frowned. "Your bulls were near the jogging path yesterday. Residents are frightened. You need to put up proper fencing." I pointed toward the wooden fence stretching along the trail. "It's my land. That path is on my property. The subdivision only exists because my grandfather allowed that road to be built," she huffed. "You may own the land, but you share a community. And communities have rules." I stared at her, calm but firm. "Ma'am, this isn't a community. This is a ranch. You don't make the rules here." She left with a glare that could sour milk. For a while, things were quiet. Fall came, painting the hills gold. My bulls, massive, dark-coated creatures with horns like polished steel, were calm, grazing as usual. They knew me, respected me, understood the land better than most humans did. Then one afternoon a storm was brewing, clouds dark, wind heavy with dust. I was heading back from checking the north pasture when my ranch hand, Lucas, came riding fast. "Boss," he said breathless, "you're not going to believe this. Margaret's car is parked right on the cattle trail near the south gate." I stopped cold. That trail was where my bulls were moved between fields. A dark blue SUV was blocking the narrow path, doors locked, engine off. No permission, no warning. Why she parked there, I didn't know. Maybe she was inspecting the land. Maybe she thought she could scare me. But what she didn't know was that my bulls had already seen the car, and they were curious. And a curious bull can be more dangerous than an angry one. That was the moment everything changed. The HOA president, the bulls, and a terrible mistake. I reached the south trail just as thunder grumbled in the distance and dust swirled over the fields. The sky was turning a bruised gray. And there, like a sore thumb on sacred land, sat Margaret Whitlock's shiny blue SUV, parked directly across the narrow dirt path where my bulls traveled between pastures. The nerve of it. Her driver's side door was flung open, like she'd stepped out in a hurry. I didn't see her at first. What I did see were my bulls, 6 of them, standing just 30 yards away. Massive shoulders, steam puffing from their nostrils, hooves scraping the dry ground. Their leader, a black Angus bull named Titan, stood at the front. He wasn't angry. Not yet, just curious. And a curious bull can be unpredictable. "Lucas, where is she?" I asked. He pointed toward the oak grove. "She went on foot down the trail. Said she was documenting illegal livestock practices." Lord have mercy. I spotted her a moment later, heels sinking into dirt. Phone held high like a weapon, snapping photos of grass, fence posts, cattle droppings, anything she thought looked like a violation of her made-up laws. "Miss Whitlock." I called out. She jumped, turned, then gave that same polished smile. "Mr. Hayes, good, you're here. I'll need you to move these animals. They're obstructing community land access." "This is my land," I said, voice low. "And you're trespassing." She ignored me, walking right past Titan like she was strolling through a grocery store. "I'm within my rights to—" Titan took a step forward. She froze. He stared at her. She stared back, first with annoyance, then confusion, and then slowly fear. She took a step backward. The other bulls followed Titan, forming a slow, deliberate circle around her. Not charging, not attacking, just surrounding her because she was in their path, in their territory. They snorted softly, hooves shifting, eyes fixed. "Don't move," I shouted. "Stay calm and don't run." But panic changes people. She looked at me, eyes wide now, voice thin. "Call them off. They're not dogs," I replied. "They don't come or stay on command." Lucas whispered beside me. "Boss, this ain't good." She tried to step backward again, but her heel caught a rock and she stumbled. Titan lowered his head, not to charge, but to intimidate. A warning. Dust spun around them. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of rain and fear. "Just stand still," I repeated. "They'll lose interest if you don't threaten them." "I'm the president of the HOA," she yelled, as if that title held weight with a 2,000-pound bull. Titan snorted, unimpressed. Then thunder cracked overhead. The sharp sound startled the smaller bulls. They flinched, muscles tensing. Margaret panicked. She broke the one rule of ranch survival. She ran. She sprinted toward her SUV, heels slipping in the dirt, heart probably thundering louder than the sky. Titan's head snapped up. He didn't charge, but he moved fast, cutting her off, planting himself between her and the car. She stumbled again, falling to the ground, hands scraping on gravel. The bulls closed in, not attacking but crowding. Close enough that she could hear them breathing, feel the earth shake beneath their hooves. She screamed. Lucas looked at me. "We gotta do something!" "I know." I grabbed my rope from the saddle horn, swung it once and cracked it in the air, not to hit the bulls, but to get their attention. Titan's ears flicked toward me. He stared at me, waiting. "Back," I said firmly. "Move on." He didn't move at first. Then slowly, with the kind of respect earned over years, he stepped aside. The other bulls followed. The circle opened just enough for her to crawl backwards toward her car. She didn't get in, though. She just crouched there, shaking, expensive blouse covered in dirt, hair tangled in the wind. Her voice trembled. You need to control them." I looked at her, this woman who believed rules on paper meant power over land, over nature. "They're not the problem," I said quietly. "You walked onto their trail. You disrespected their space." Before she could argue, sirens wailed in the distance. She must have called the sheriff before I arrived. Of course she did. The sheriff. The standoff and the truth comes out. The first raindrops began to fall just as the sheriff's SUV rolled down the dirt road. Sirens fading into the low rumble of thunder. Dust and wind whipped through the valley, carrying tension like electricity in the air. Sheriff Tom Caldwell stepped out, boots sinking into the mud. He was a tall, broad man in his 50s, weathered by years of ranch disputes, broken fences, and neighbor quarrels. He removed his hat, scanned the scene, my bulls grazing calmly again, me and Lucas standing near the fence, and Margaret Whitlock trembling beside her parked vehicle, covered in dirt like she had crawled through a storm. Good Lord. "Margaret," he muttered, squinting, "what did you get yourself into?" She rushed toward him, heels slipping again. "Sheriff!" Arrest him. His animals tried to attack me. They could have killed me. Sheriff Caldwell didn't look at me first. He looked at the bulls, then at her car blocking the cattle trail. Margaret, he said slowly, is that your SUV parked in the middle of the ranch path? Yes, but that's irrelevant. His bulls surrounded me and... Answer the question, he snapped. She hesitated. Yes. He rubbed his forehead. Did he give you permission to be on ranch property? She hesitated again. I don't need permission. This land connects to the community trail. I stepped forward. That trail exists because my grandfather allowed it. But the land underneath, it still belongs to the Hayes Ranch. Margaret's face flushed. This is outrageous. I'm the HOA president. We're responsible for safety. His bulls... Caldwell held up a hand. You're out of your jurisdiction. The HOA has no authority here. For a moment, there was only wind and distant thunder. Then the sheriff turned to me. Sam, what happened? I told him everything. How Margaret parked on the trail, wandered into the herd area, startled the bulls, then ran, triggering their instinct to block her path. Caldwell nodded, then turned to Margaret. Is that true? She straightened her shoulders, dirt still on her cheek. I was investigating community hazards. His animals were too close to residential property. Lucas snorted quietly. The nearest house is half a mile away. For the record, Caldwell said, pulling out his notepad, you trespassed on private property, obstructed livestock movement and endangered yourself. Her mouth opened. Speechless at the idea she might be at fault, I demand he be fined. His animals are dangerous. She insisted. Caldwell glared. Bulls are bulls. They're not dangerous unless provoked. She looked shocked. Like nature itself had betrayed her authority, but the sheriff wasn't done. Margaret, do you know how many ranches we've lost over the years because of city folks thinking land behaves like sidewalks? This isn't a gated neighborhood. This is cattle country. Rain began to fall harder now. Tapping against her SUV, my bulls were already wandering back to the pasture, storm clouds rolling over their dark backs. Then something shifted in her tone. Not anger, something close to defeat. I was only trying to make the community better, she muttered. I sighed. By sending me letters about rooster noise? Or telling me how to run a ranch I've cared for since I was a boy? She looked away, jaw clenched. Sheriff Caldwell looked between us. Here's what's happening. Margaret, you're getting a formal trespass warning. If you step foot on this ranch again without permission, you'll be arrested. Her eyes widened. You can't do that. I can. And I will, he said firmly. She swallowed hard. And Sam, the sheriff said, turning to me, you might want to put up clearer signs near the community trail. Maybe some fencing. Not because she's right, but to stop this from happening again. I nodded. Fair enough. Margaret slowly walked back to her SUV. Titan, my bull, watched silently from a distance, rain glistening on his dark coat like armor. She opened the door, then paused. Her voice was quieter now. This isn't over. I met her gaze. You're right. It's not. But next time it won't be bulls you answer to. It'll be the law. She slammed the door and drove away, tires spraying mud. Sheriff Caldwell tipped his hat. Keep the bulls calm, Sam. Storm's coming. And it was. In more ways than one. Because the HOA president wasn't going to accept humiliation so easily, and I had a feeling she'd come back, only next time. She wouldn't be alone. Retaliation, legal threats, and preparing for the final showdown. 3 days passed after the bull incident, and the storm that Sheriff Caldwell warned about wasn't just in the clouds, it was brewing in the HOA boardroom. The skies cleared, but I could feel the tension in the air, sharp as barbed wire. Margaret Whitlock went silent. No calls, no letters, no sudden appearances on my land. At first, I thought maybe she'd learned her lesson. But on the fourth morning, a white envelope was tucked under my ranch gate sign, stamped, official, cold. Notice of pending civil action, property safety negligence. I opened it right there in the driveway. According to the letter, the HOA was filing a lawsuit, claiming my ranch posed imminent danger to nearby residents, citing aggressive livestock, unsafe fencing, and emotional distress inflicted upon HOA President Margaret. Whitlock, I almost laughed. Emotional distress. From walking straight into a herd of bulls like she was visiting a petting zoo. Lucas walked up beside me, squinting at the papers. She's lost her damn mind, but it wasn't funny for long. Attached was a stack of photos she'd taken that day. Muddy trails, hoof prints, a close-up of Titan's horns, and even a dramatic photo of her dirt-streaked face, as if she'd survived a war zone instead of her own pride. I took the envelope inside and called my lawyer. Rebecca Carter, sharp, clever, and raised on a ranch herself. She skimmed the documents, leaned back in her chair and sighed. They don't have a case. The HOA has no authority over agricultural land. She trespassed, but she's banking on one thing, pressure and public opinion. What do you mean? I asked. She's not trying to win in court, Rebecca explained. She's trying to make you bend first, apologize, fence your land. Make her look like a savior to her community. Well, that wasn't going to happen. Later that afternoon, I drove into town for supplies. At the feed store, whispers followed me like tumbleweeds. An older man leaned over the counter and said, "Heard your bulls nearly trampled the HOA, lady." Another woman chuckled. "Bet she won't wear heels on your land again." But not everyone was laughing. At the coffee shop, 3 HOA residents sat at a table, staring at me like I was a villain. One of them stood. "Your animals are dangerous. Kids walk near that trail." I met his eyes. "My bulls don't leave my land, but your HOA president did." He sat down without another word. By the next day, things escalated. Margaret had organized a community meeting in the Cedar Ridge clubhouse. I wasn't invited, but small towns have long ears. Rebecca insisted I go, not to argue, but to listen. The meeting room was full, homeowners in clean-pressed shirts, sipping coffee and clutching flyers titled "Ranch Safety Concerns." Margaret stood at the front, bandage on her arm for dramatic effect. She clicked a slideshow, pictures of bulls, fences, even a slow-motion video of her running from them. Dramatic music added like it was a movie trailer. She spoke calmly at first. "This isn't about me. It's about safety. About our children. We can't live under the threat of uncontrolled livestock." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Then she went further. "I propose we petition the county to declare the Hayes Ranch a public safety hazard. If he won't comply willingly, we'll make it a legal necessity." That was my breaking point. I stood up. The room went silent. "You walked onto my land," I said. "You parked your car across a working cattle trail. You ignored warnings. And now you're calling me a threat." She smiled, but her eyes were cold. "Your ranch borders our community. That makes it our concern." "No," I replied calmly. "It makes it our shared responsibility to respect boundaries." She glared. "Or what, your bulls will handle it?" I took a deep breath. "Next time it won't be bulls. It'll be lawyers. And the sheriff." The room buzzed with whispers. Some faces were uncertain now, not as convinced by her performance. Rebecca stepped forward beside me. "We have evidence. Photos, legal land titles, trespassing reports. If you push this, the court will side with Mr. Hayes." For a moment, Margaret faltered. Just a flicker. But then she lifted her chin. "We'll see." The meeting ended with no resolution, but war lines had been drawn. That night I stood at the edge of the pasture. Titan stood beside me, calm, steady. The stars stretched across the sky like a promise. The battle wasn't over, but I was ready. The final showdown. Justice served and peace restored. The morning of the court hearing came with a cold breeze, pale sky, and the distant sound of cattle bells. I stood by the fence, watching Titan and the herd graze peacefully. They didn't know today might decide the future of this land. But I did. Margaret had gone all in. The HOA had officially filed a complaint with the county, claiming my ranch was a public hazard. She brought witnesses, photos, and even reporters from the local newspaper. To her, this wasn't just about bulls or fences. It was about power, control, but for me it was about heritage, about family, about land, older than her HOA rules and concrete sidewalks. I arrived at the county courthouse with my lawyer, Rebecca Carter. Sheriff Caldwell was already there, hat low, coffee in hand. He gave me a nod. "Whatever happens in there, remember, You've got more people on your side than you think." Inside, the courtroom was packed. HOA members sat in neat rows, stiff-backed and angry. On my side sat ranchers, farmers and old-timers who respected the dirt more than paperwork. Judge Willis, a stern but fair man in his 60s, took the bench. "This court will now hear the matter of Cedar Ridge HOA versus Samuel Hayes." Margaret spoke first. She stood tall, polished, confident. "Your Honor, Mr. Hayes knowingly allows dangerous livestock within close proximity to residential areas. I was surrounded and nearly attacked. The community lives in fear. We ask the court to force him to install secure fencing, restrict animal movement, or relocate the herd farther from homes." Her attorney handed the judge printed photos, bulls, hoofprints, even dramatic images of her dirty clothes and scraped palms. Then it was our turn. Rebecca stood, calm, steady. "Your Honor, this is not a case of danger. It is a case of trespassing. Mrs. Whitlock entered private ranch land without permission, parked her car on a livestock trail, and approached a herd of bulls, alone. These animals reacted naturally. They did not charge. They did not harm her. She panicked. She handed the judge our evidence, land deeds. Maps proving the trail was fully on my land. Security camera photos showing Margaret's SUV blocking the cattle route. And Sheriff Caldwell's official trespass report." The judge turned to the sheriff. "Sheriff, is this report accurate?" Caldwell stood. "Yes, Your Honor. Mrs. Whitlock was on Hayes's land without consent. The bulls did not touch her. Her actions caused the danger." A quiet murmur spread through the room. Then I was asked to speak. I stood slowly, hat in hand. "Your Honor, my family's ran this ranch for 4 generations. Our land is fenced, marked, and respected by every neighbor, except one. I don't want trouble. I don't want a fight. I just want to work my land without someone trying to control it from a boardroom." Silence. Judge Willis looked between us, then spoke. "This court finds no evidence of negligence or danger caused by Mr. Hayes. Instead, the court recognizes Mrs. Whitlock trespassed on private agricultural land and interfered with livestock operations." Margaret's face went pale. The judge continued, "Mrs. Whitlock, you are issued a formal warning. Any further trespassing will result in charges. The HOA has no authority over Hayes Ranch. Case dismissed." A wave of relieved breaths and quiet cheers rose from my side of the room. Margaret stood, trembling, not with fear, but with humiliation. Papers crumpled in her hands. She opened her mouth like she might argue, but no words came. She stormed out. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked for statements. I only said, "Respect the land, and it will respect you." Sheriff Caldwell put a hand on my shoulder. "You handled that well." Lucas came up grinning. "Told you the bulls were the smartest ones in this story." Life slowly returned to normal. A week later, a new sign stood at the ranch trail. "Private property, livestock area. Enter at your own risk. Not a threat." Just the truth. Margaret resigned as HOA president 2 months later. Rumor has it, the board voted her out after legal fees and embarrassment. She avoids the ranch road now. Whenever she sees me in town, she lowers her head and walks away. One evening I stood by the fence again. Titan grazed under the orange sunset, calm as a king in his rightful land. I rested my hand on the wooden post and exhaled. Peace had returned, not because I fought with anger, but because I stood my ground, respectfully, firmly, just like the land taught me.